Hey everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to start something kind of new. It's a 5-minute study through the book of Acts. This is kind of the abbreviated version of our long verse-by-verse study. We've done studies like this for Matthew and Luke, and now we'll start with the book of Acts. And this is going to accompany the bigger study. So we've got, for the book of Acts, we're going to start the verse-by-verse study in about a week. And if you're watching this in the future, we probably already started. We've got character studies that are going along with that. We've got other handouts and printables that are free on our website. And we're going to try to compile all of this to make a really comprehensive course for people to really get to know the book. I just want to give a huge thank you to our patron supporters who make all of this possible. I wouldn't be able to put as much time as I do into it without those patron supporters, so thank you. And if you want to support a work that is dedicated to teaching other people the Bible and helping them understand the gospel, you can check out the link to our Patreon down below. There's also a link to free, yes, all of our resources are free downloads of the handout that you're about to see up on the screen and that we're going to be using for this study. So let's talk about the book of Acts, chapter 1, in approximately 5 minutes. The intro doesn't count. So as we always do with these, let's talk about when the events of chapter 1 took place. All of the events in chapter 1 took place somewhere between like 29 and 30 AD. This would have been right after Jesus' ministry. This would have been within 50 days of his resurrection. Our main characters in this chapter, well, we've got Jesus. This is going to be the last chapter where he's a key character. Well, that's kind of strange to say, but he's leaving the earth. He's ascending back to heaven in this chapter. So he is the Messiah. He's the one who died on the cross and then resurrected and gives hope to all mankind that they too can be saved from their sins and live with God eternally. Then we've got 11 apostles. These were Jesus' students, and they were going to be witnesses to his resurrection to the world. There's also mention of 2 kind of mysterious men. These men appeared next to the apostles at the Ascension, and they were dressed in white robes, and most people think that they were probably angels. And then we've got Matthias. Matthias is an individual who has been, some dog is barking outside. So I live in Albania, fun fact. I live in Albania, and there's like people love Pomeranians here. Like, I don't know what it is. Everybody has a white Pomeranian, and they bark like little yappy dogs. So anyway, back to Matthias. Matthias was the man who was selected to become the 12th apostle. You might say, wait, I thought there were already 12. Well, we'll talk about that in a second. Where did the events of Acts chapter 1 take place? Well, all of this happens in and around the city of Jerusalem. The Bible tells us that Jesus ascended back to heaven around Bethany, around the town of Bethany, which was just to the east of Jerusalem. Okay, now for our outline. In verses 1 through 5, Luke, the writer of the book of Acts, he introduces his book, and he addresses it to a man by the name of Theophilus. This is the same guy that he addressed his first writing, the Gospel of Luke, to. Luke's previous book was all about Jesus' life and his ministry, and it recorded that so that Theophilus could have an understanding of all of the events that happened. After Jesus' resurrection, and before he left them, he told the apostles that they were supposed to stay in Jerusalem and wait for God to send his Holy Spirit. And then in verses 6 through 11, we have the Ascension of Jesus. Jesus' work on earth as a man was completed. He was now going back to sit at the throne of God. And while he was talking to his apostles about the Holy Spirit coming and empowering them and how they would move forward in the early church, he was lifted up and taken out of their sight into the clouds. And those 2 men who we talked about earlier, who were dressed in white robes, they appeared next to the apostles. And they asked the apostles what they were looking at, and they told them that one day Jesus would return in a similar way to the way that he had left them. So then our last section, verses 12 through 26, this section is about the selection of a new apostle to replace Judas Iscariot. After Jesus left and went back to heaven, the apostles did exactly what he told them to do. They went back to Jerusalem. They stayed in an upper room with some other believers, some women, and Mary, Jesus' mother, and also Jesus' brothers. One day, the apostle Peter stood up, and there was a gathering of some other believers, about 120 of them. Peter said that the betrayal of Judas Iscariot, recorded in the Gospels, that was actually predicted by the Old Testament prophets. If you remember, Judas Iscariot was the apostle who betrayed Jesus with a kiss to the Jewish authorities. And afterwards, he really regretted what he did, and he went out and he killed himself. Well, that took the 12 apostles down to the 11 apostles. So here, the Holy Spirit directed Peter to select a new one. The candidates for selection were required to have been with the apostles from the time of John the Baptist's ministry all the way up to Jesus' ascension. There are two men who met those requirements and were put up as candidates. Their names were Joseph, called Barsabbas, and Matthias. And after praying and casting lots, the lot fell on Matthias, and he was selected as the new 12th apostle. And now for our applications. We've actually got two here. One thing to notice is that the apostles were told to go back to Jerusalem and to wait there for the Holy Spirit. They weren't to move forward with their ministry until the Holy Spirit empowered them. And I think there's a good lesson there that dependence on God's guidance and His power is essential for the success of the church. Just like the apostles, our hope of success, our ambition should be grounded in the power of God working through us, not our own ingenuity and our own plans and our own cleverness. And then the second application, we should always pray before we make big decisions. Even though the 11 apostles probably knew Joseph and Matthias pretty well before they put them up as candidates to be the apostle, they didn't rely on their own assessment of their character to make the decision. They still went to God and asked Him for insights. So the application for us is that when we're making decisions, no matter how familiar we are with the situation or the variables involved, we need to go to God and ask Him for help.